Click here to start from the beginning.
15 men on the dead man's chest. Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum. Drink and the devil had done for the rest. Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum.
My name is Jim Hawkins. When I was a boy, my parents owned an inn on the coast called the Admiral Benbow. I well remember the day the scarred old sailor arrived, carrying his sea chest behind him and singing a sea shanty.
15 men on the dead man's chest. Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum.
We were to call him the captain, and he gave me a silver fourpence to look out for a one-legged sailor. The thought of this man seemed to make him nervous. The captain was a frightening man who was often drunk and was full of terrifying sea stories. He bullied everyone in the inn, and he never paid his bill. Only our magistrate, Dr. Livesey, seemed to be able to control him. But one day a stranger arrived. He was carrying a cutlass, and 2 of the fingers on his right hand were missing. He said he was looking for a friend he called Bill, and this Bill, it seemed, was none other than the captain. When our old sailor saw who this newcomer was, he was shocked.
Black dog,
he cried. The man replied,
Black dog as ever was, come to see his old shipmate.
I retired to the bar and tried to listen. They talked quietly, and at first I could hear nothing. Then the captain shouted,
No, 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 and an end to it.
And then,
If it comes to swinging, swing all, say I.
a ferocious sword fight broke out between them. Then I saw Black Dog run screaming from the inn, chased by the captain. But before he could catch up with him, the captain collapsed. He had had a stroke. Dr. Livesey was called, and he managed to revive him. Said the doctor,
He should stay in bed for a week. That's the best thing for him.
but the captain would not listen to it.
Awake?
He cried.
Hell, have a black spot on me by then.
But what is the black spot, Captain? I asked.
Summons, mate.
He answered, and fell asleep. A few days later, a blind beggar arrived at the inn. He said his name was Pew, and made me take him to the captain. The captain was horrified to see him.
Boy,
Said the beggar,
take his hand by the wrist and bring it near mine.
I obeyed him, and he passed a piece of paper to the old sailor, then went. The captain looked at the note.
The black spot?
He shouted.
10 o'clock! 6 hours!
But then once more he collapsed with a stroke, and this time he was dead. I could barely bring myself to touch the captain's body, but I found the key to his sea chest around his neck. My mother and I went up to the captain's room to open the chest. In it we found a suit of clothes, sticks of tobacco, 2 pistols, an old Spanish watch, and some other trinkets. There was also a bundle tied up in oilcloth, and a bag full of gold coins. Suddenly, in the distance, we heard the tap, tap, tapping of the blind man's stick and many voices. He was returning, as he had promised, at 10 o'clock, and he was bringing others with him. Clutching the mysterious bundle and the bag of gold, we fled from the inn. Leaving the inn in the hands of the ruffians, we made our way to the home of the local magistrate, Squire Trelawney. There I was shown into the library, all lined with bookcases, where the squire was talking with Dr. Livesey.
Good evening, friend Jim,
Said the doctor.
What good wind brings you here?
I told my story, and you should have seen how the 2 gentlemen leaned forward and looked at each other and forgot to smoke in their interest and surprise.
And so, Jim,
Said the doctor.
you have the thing that they were after, have you?
Here it is, sir, said I. and gave him the oilskin packet. He broke open the seals with great care and pulled out a book containing lots of strange writing and pages of accounts.
I can't make head or tail of this,
said the doctor.
Let's see what else there is.
And they unfolded a map of an island. The map was very detailed. It showed an island with latitude and longitude, soundings, names of hills and bays and inlets. In fact, there was everything needed to bring a ship to a safe anchorage upon its shores. The island was about 9 miles long and 5 across, shaped, you might say, like a fat dragon standing up. It had 2 fine landlocked harbours, and there was a hill in the centre marked the Spyglass. There were also several additions which seemed to be of a later date. Above all, I noticed 3 crosses of red ink, 2 on the north part of the island, 1 in the southwest. Beside this last, in the same red ink and in a small, neat hand, very different from the captain's tottery characters, these words had been written in: "Bulk of treasure here." At the bottom of the map we saw the initials J.F.
This must be Flint's map,
said the squire.
You heard of Flint, I suppose? He was the bloodthirstiest buccaneer that ever sailed. The Spaniards were so afraid of him. At times I was proud he was an Englishman. All he was after was money. All he cared for was money. And this map shows where he buried the treasure he had plundered from ships.
He turned to the doctor.
Livesey, you will give up your wretched practice at once. Tomorrow I start for Bristol. In 3 weeks' time... 2 weeks, 10 days, we'll have the best ship, sir, and the choicest crew in England. You'll be ship's doctor, Hawkins shall come as cabin boy, I shall be admiral. We'll have favourable winds, a quick passage, and no difficulty in finding this island, and money to eat, to roll in, to play ducks and drakes with ever after.
Trelawney,
said the doctor.
I'll go with you. So will Jim, and be a credit to you.
When I reached Bristol, the squire sent me to the Spyglass Inn to meet the innkeeper, a man called Long John Silver. I found he had but 1 leg. I asked myself, could he be the 1-legged sailor that our captain had feared so? But he seemed so very pleasant and cheerful, I soon forgot my suspicion. Why, he was so helpful, I found he had even aided the squire recruit most of the hands. He also signed on himself, as the ship's cook. We boarded our ship, called the Hispaniola, and met the captain, who was called Mr. Smollett, and he told us straight away he wasn't happy about the voyage ahead. "I'd better speak plain," he said. "I don't like this cruise, and I don't like the men." The squire took an instant dislike to him.
"Perhaps, sir, you don't like the ship either,"
he snapped. Dr. Livesey cut in.
You don't, you say, like this cruise. Now tell me why,
said Captain Smollett. "I was engaged under sealed orders. Now I find every man before the mast knows more than I do. I learn we're going after treasure. Hear it from my own hands, mind you. I don't like treasure voyages on any account, and I don't like them above all when they are secret. The secret's even been told to Silver's parrot," Captain Smollett told the squire. "And Silver's helped you select the crew. I didn't. I tell you what I've heard. That you have a map of the island, that there's crosses on the map to show where the treasure is, and that the island lies..." And he named the latitude and longitude exactly. "Hear me a few words more," went on the captain. "They're putting the powder in the arms in the forehold. I suggest it should go in the stern, near our own quarters."
In other words,
said the doctor,
you fear a mutiny.
The captain said, "I am responsible for the ship's safety and the life of every man jack aboard. I see things going, as I think, not quite right, and I ask you to take certain precautions or let me resign my berth." The doctor and the squire agreed. Immediately the men were ordered to begin moving the arms and powder to the stern. All night the crew worked to prepare the ship for sailing and getting things stowed in their place. A little before dawn, the boatswain sounded his pipe, and the crew began to man the capstan bars.
Aye, aye, mates,
said Long John, who was standing by with his crutch under his arm, and at once began to sing out the words I knew so well.
15 men on the dead man's chest.
Then the whole crew bore chorus.
Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum.
That exciting moment carried me back to the old Admiral Benbow, and I seemed to hear the voice of the old captain piping in the chorus. Then we weighed anchor for Treasure Island. I am not going to relate the voyage in detail. The ship proved to be a good ship, and the crew were capable seamen, and Captain Smollett thoroughly understood his business. All the crew respected and even obeyed Long John Silver. To me, he was always kind and glad to see me in his galley, which he kept as clean as a new pin.
Come away, Hawkins.
He would say,
Come and have a yarn with John. Here's Captain Flint. I calls my parrot Captain Flint after the famous buccaneer. That bird is maybe 200 years old, Hawkins, and if anyone's seen more wickedness, it must be the devil himself.
and the parrot would scream with great rapidity, "Beat the mate! Beat the mate! Beat the mate!" Just after sundown, when all my work was over, and I was on my way to my berth, it occurred to me that I should like an apple. The men were all forward, looking out for the island. The man at the helm was watching the luff of the sail and whistling away gently to himself, and that was the only sound excepting the swish of the sea against the bow. I had to get bodily into the apple barrel, as I found there was scarce an apple left. What with the dark and the rocking of the ship, I fell asleep. Suddenly the barrel shook when a heavy man sat down close by. I was just about to jump up when the man began to speak. It was Silver's voice. Before I had heard a dozen words, I knew we were in danger.
No, not I.
Long John was saying.
Flint was captain. I was quartermaster. Same broadside I lost me peg. Pew lost his eyes.
So Silver had sailed with the terrible Captain Flint and the horrible blind Pew as a pirate. And he was trying to talk the youngest of the sailors, Dick, into joining him in some new crime.
Well, there's my hand on it,
said Dick. And then they were joined by one of Silver's mates, Israel Hands. Hands said he wanted to kill us all and take the treasure as soon as possible. But Silver told him they would let us get the treasure on board. Then they would overrun and kill us. So it was decided. You may fancy the terror I was in. I should have leapt up and run for it, but at that moment Silver called for an apple. Surely I would be found. But instead, Dick suggested rum, and was duly sent to get some. Just as he returned, the moon rose, and there was a cry of, "Land ho!" There was a great rush of feet across the deck. Away to the southwest of us, we saw two low hills about a couple of miles apart. Rising behind one of them, a third and higher hill. All three seemed sharp and conical in figure. The Hispaniola was laid a couple of points nearer the wind, and now sailed a course that would just clear the island on the east. "Hello, man," said Captain Smollett. "Has any one of you ever seen that land ahead?"
I have, sir,
said Silver.
I've watered there with the trader I was cooking.
"The anchorage is on the south, behind an islet, I fancy," asked the captain.
Yes, sir. Skeleton Island, they calls it. It were a main place for pirates once.
"I have a chart here," says Captain Smollett. "See if that's the place." Long John's eyes burned in his head as he looked at the chart, but by the fresh look of the paper I knew he was doomed to disappointment. This was not the map we found in the old man's chest, but an accurate copy, with the single exception of the red crosses and the written notes.
Yes, sir,
said Silver.
This is the spot, to be sure, and very prettily drawn out. Aye, here it is. Captain Kidd's anchorage. There's a strong current runs along the south and then north up the west coast. Right you was, sir,
he continued,
to haul your wind and keep the weather of the island. Leastways, if such was your intention, is to enter and clean the ship's keel. There ain't no better place for that in these waters.
Thank you, my man, says Captain Smollett. You may go. The gentleman had gone below and was seated round the table having a drink. The crew had been told to take a glass of grog to toast our arrival.
Now, Hawkins,
said the squire,
you have something to say. Speak up.
I did as I was bid and told the whole details of Silver's conversation. Nobody interrupted me till I was done, nor did any of the three of them make so much as a movement, but they kept their eye upon my face from first to last.
Captain,
said the squire,
you are right, and I was wrong. I own myself an ass. I await your orders.
No more an ass than I, sir, returned Captain Smollett.
Captain,
said the doctor,
with your permission, this is all Silver's doing. A very remarkable man.
He looked remarkable well strung from a yardarm, sir, returned the captain. I never heard of a crew that meant a mutiny but what showed signs before the mischief. This crew beats me. We must go on because we can't turn back, continued the captain. We'll have no trouble from the crew, at least until the treasure's found. After that, we will probably come to blows some fine day. We can count, I take it, on your own home servants to help us, Mr. Trelawney?
As upon myself,
declared the squire.
We must lay to and keep a bright lookout. It's trying on a man I know, but we still have a few faithful hounds.
Jim here,
said the doctor,
can help us more than anyone. The men are not shy with him, and Jim is a noticing lad.
Hawkins, I put prodigious faith in you,
added the squire. I began to feel pretty desperate at this, for I felt altogether helpless. Yet, by an odd train of circumstances, it was indeed through me that safety came. In the meantime, of the 26 on board, we could rely on only 7, and one of those was a boy, me. The following morning, there was not a breath of air moving. A peculiar stagnant smell hung over the anchorage, a smell of sodden leaves and rotting tree trunks. Dr. Livesey was heard muttering,
I don't know about treasure, but I'll stake my wig that there's fever here.
The men lay about the deck, growling together in talk. My lads, said the captain, a turn ashore will hurt nobody. You can take the gigs, and as many as please can go ashore for the day. The silly fellows must have thought they would break their shins over treasure as soon as they were landed, for they all came out of their sulks in a moment and gave a cheer. Silver was left to arrange the party. 6 fellows were to stay on board, and the remaining 13, including Silver, began to embark. Then it was that there came into my head the first of the mad notions that contributed so much to save our lives. In a jiffy, I had slipped over the side and curled up under a foresheet of one of the boats, and almost at the same moment she shoved off. No one took notice of me, only the bow oar saying,
Is that you, Jim? Keep your head down.
But Silver from the other boat looked sharply over. From that moment, I began to regret what I had done. The crew raced for the beach, but the boat I was in shot far ahead of her consort, and the bows struck among the shoreside trees. I caught a branch and swung myself out. Then I lunged into the nearest thicket.
Jim! Jim!
I heard Silver shout. I ran straight ahead before my nose till I could run no longer. Meanwhile, the doctor and Hunter, one of the squire's men, left the becalmed Hispaniola. They made towards the stockade we had seen on the chart. They found a stout log house surrounded by a 6-foot-high fence, the whole set on a knoll. All round was a cleared wide space. A spring inside the stockade was the thing, because the Hispaniola had run out of water. This was the only supply. The doctor and Hunter decided to set up camp at the stockade, but first they had to return to the Hispaniola for supplies and the others. Hunter brought the boat round under the stern port, and they set to work loading her with powder tins, muskets, bags of biscuits, kegs of pork, a cask of cognac, and the doctor's medicine chest. In the meantime, the squire and the captain hailed the principal pirate aboard and said,
"Here are 2 of us, with a brace of pistols each. If any of your 6 make a signal of any description, that man's dead."
They were a great deal taken aback. They went about ship at once, and a head popped out on deck. "Down, dog!" cries the captain. The head popped back again, and they heard no more of those 6 very faint-hearted seamen. They had the jolly boat loaded as much as they dared, and made for the shore again. The 5th and final trip was quite different from any of the others. The boat was gravely overloaded with the rest of the party, as well as the powder, pork, and bread bags.
We'll never get her ashore at this rate,
said the doctor. Suddenly the captain spoke up, and his voice was a little charged. "The gun!" said he. They had forgotten the long 9 cannon. To their horror, they saw the rogues they had left behind were preparing to fire the gun. At the same moment, the cannon fired and the ball fell close by, causing the boat to sink. All aboard had no option but to wade ashore with what provisions they could. But at the time I knew nothing of this. I was so pleased at having given the slip to Long John. I had come out upon an open piece of undulating sandy country dotted with trees. Here and there were flowering plants that were unknown to me. Here and there I saw snakes, and one raised his head from a ledge of rock and hissed at me. Suddenly, I saw a figure leap with great rapidity from behind the trunk of a tree. The terror of this new apparition brought me to a standstill. I began to recall what I had heard of cannibals. He was concealed by this time behind another tree trunk. But he must have been watching me closely, for as soon as I moved, he reappeared. "Who are you?" I asked him.
Ben Gunn,"
he answered, and his voice sounded hoarse and awkward like a rusty lock.
"I'm poor Ben Gunn, I am, and I haven't spoken with a Christian these 3 years."
I could see that he was a white man like myself. His skin, wherever it was exposed, was burnt by the sun. His lips were black, and his fair eyes looked quite startling in so dark a face. He was clothed with the tatters of old ship's canvas and old sea cloth. About his waist he wore an old brass-buckled leather belt, which was the one thing solid in his whole accoutrement. 3 years? I cried. "Were you shipwrecked?"
"Nay, mate,"
said he.
"Marooned. Marooned 3 years agone," he continued, "and lived on goats since then, and berries, and oysters. But, mate, my heart is sore for Christian diet. You mightn't happen to have a piece of cheese about you now. What you call yourself, mate?"
"Jim," I told him.
"Now, Jim, you tell me true. That ain't Flint's ship?"
he asked. "It's not Flint's ship, and Flint is dead. But I'll tell you true as you ask me. There are some of Flint's men aboard. Worse luck for the rest of us."
"Not a man with one leg?"
he gasped. "Silver?" I asked.
"Ah, Silver,"
says he.
"That were his name."
"He's the cook, and the ringleader too," I told him.
"Now, I'll tell you what,"
Ben Gunn went on.
"So much I'll tell you, and no more. I were in Flint's ship when he buried the treasure, he and 6 strong seamen. They were ashore nigh on a week, and us standing off and on in the old walrus. One fine day, up went the signal, and back comes Flint by himself. There he was, and the six all dead and buried. How he done it, not a man aboard us could make out. Long John, he was quartermaster, and they asked him where the treasure was. Says he, you can go ashore if you like and stay, he says. But as for the ship, she'll beat up for more by thunder. We sailed away to find more to plunder. Well,
said Ben.
I was in another ship 3 years back, and we sighted this island. Boys, said I, here's Flint's treasure, let's land and find it. 12 days we looked for it, and every day they had the worst word for me, until one fine morning all hands went back aboard. Says the captain, this is what you can do, Benjamin Gunn. And he says, here's a musket, a spade, and a pickaxe. You can stay here and find Flint's money for yourself. 3 years have I been here, and not a bite of Christian diet from that day to this.
Just then, all the echoes of the island awoke and bellowed to the thunder of a cannon. "They have begun to fight!" I cried. "Follow me!" The Hispaniola still lay where she had anchored, but there was the Jolly Roger, the black flag of piracy flying from her peak. Even as I looked, there came another red flash and another report that sent the echoes clattering. Then one more round shot whistled through the air. It was the last of the cannonade. Ben Gunn looked at the ship and said,
When Ben Gunn is wanted, you know where to find him, Jim. Just where you found him today. There is a boat hidden near the White Rock. Use it as you will.
Ben then turned and disappeared into the woods. I made for the stockade and there immediately told my story to the gentry.
Is this Ben Gunn a man?
Asked the doctor. I do not know, sir, said I. I'm not very sure whether he's sane. Returned the doctor.
If there's any doubt about the matter, I would say he is. A man who's spent the last 3 years biting his nails on a desert island, Jim, can't expect to appear as sane as you or me.
At that moment I heard someone shout,
Flag of truce!
Then immediately after he shouted again, with a cry of surprise.
It's Silver himself!
The squire went to the gate and looked out.
Captain Silver, sir. To come aboard and make terms.
Captain Silver! Don't know him? Who's he?
Cried the squire.
Me, sir. The poor lads have chosen me captain after your desertion, sir.
Silver was tricked out in his best, an immense blue coat, thick with brass buttons, and a fine laced hat. Said Silver,
We want that treasure, and we'll have it. That's our point. You have the chart, haven't you?
The squire looked at him calmly.
You give us the chart to get the treasure by, and we'll offer you a choice. I'll give you my word of honor to clap you somewhere safe ashore after the treasure's been shipped, and we'll speak to the first ship we sight as to your position. Refuse that, and you've seen the last of me but musket balls.
As soon as Silver disappeared, they gave us little time for thought. Suddenly, there was a loud huzzah! A little cloud of pirates leapt from the woods on the north side and ran straight on the stockade. At the same moment, the fire was once more opened from the woods, and a rifle ball sang through the doorway. It knocked the doctor's musket into bits. In a moment, 4 pirates had swarmed up the mound and were upon us. We fell to with our cutlasses.
Round the house, lads! Round the house!
Cried the captain. The battle went on apace.
Fire from the house!
Cried the doctor. Soon the pirates fled, leaving those who had fallen, 4 on the inside and 1 on the outside of the palisade. I slipped out of the stockade and made for the shore. There I found Ben Gunn's boat and went alongside the Hispaniola. So far, so good. But it next occurred to me that a taut hawser, suddenly cut, is a thing as dangerous as a kicking horse. 10 to 1 if I were so foolhardy as to cut the Hispaniola from her anchor whilst the wind was strong. The result would be instant death. To my great joy, the wind began to slacken, and the hawser loosened in my grasp. All this time I heard someone moving about in the cabin above. I took out my knife and cut one strand after another till the vessel swung by 2. Making a good, tough effort, I cut the last fibres through. Instantly I caught hold of the remains of the hawser and climbed aboard. I looked around, and there was Israel Hands already halfway towards me with a dirk in his hand. I drew a pistol from my pocket, took cool aim, and drew the trigger. The hammer fell, but there was neither flash nor sound. The priming was useless with seawater. I took out my other pistol. "One more step, Mr. Hands," said I, "and I'll blow out your brains. Dead men don't bite, you know," I added with a chuckle. Hands threw his knife, and there was I pinned by the shoulder to the mast. In the horrid pain and surprise, the pistol went off, and Mr. Hands plunged overboard. The knife, in fact, had come the nearest in the world to missing me altogether. It held me by a mere pinch of skin, and this the shudder tore away. I was once again my own master, having been tucked to the mast by my coat and shirt. It was getting dark, and I set sail single-handed for the stockade. The evening breeze had sprung up, and though it was well warded off by the hill with the 2 peaks upon the east, the cordage had begun to sing and the sails to rattle to and fro. At last we reached the anchorage, and I waded ashore, leaving the Hispaniola to trust to luck, like myself. At least, and at last, I was off the sea, nor had I returned empty-handed. There lay the schooner, clear at last from buccaneers, and ready for our own men to board and get to sea again. I was approaching the stockade when I heard the sea cry of the watch, that beautiful
All's well.
It had never been so reassuring to my ears. There was no doubt of one thing. They kept an infamous bad watch. If it had been Silver and his lads who were now creeping in on them, not a soul would have seen daylight. Then all of a sudden, a shrill voice broke forth out of the darkness, screaming,
"Busy, busy!"
and so forth. It was Silver's parrot, Captain Flint. It was she, keeping better watch than any human being, who thus announced my arrival with her wearisome refrain. I had no time to recover from this shock than the voice of Silver cried,
"Who goes?"
I started to move, but his hand fell on my shoulder out of the dark.
"So,"
said he.
"Here's Jim Hawkins, shiver me timbers. Dropped in, eh?"
The red glare of the torch, lighting up the interior of the blockhouse, showed me the worst of my apprehension realized. The pirates were in possession of the house and stores. Silver spoke.
"Yesterday morning, Mr. Hawkins, in the dog watch, down came Dr. Livesey with a flag of truce. Says he, 'Captain Silver, you sold out. Ship's gone.' We looked out, and by thunder, the old ship was gone. Says the doctor, 'Well, let's bargain.' We bargained, him and I, and here we are. Stores, brandy, and blockhouse. Now, you must choose to stay with us or die."
"Well," says I, "the laugh's on my side." I proceeded to tell them of how I had cut adrift the schooner, and that I had hidden it away. "Kill me if you please, or spare me. But one thing I'll say and no more. If you spare me, bygones are bygones, and when you fellows are in court for piracy, I'll save you all I can." The pirates began to mutter among themselves when Silver spoke up.
"I'm captain here by election. I'm captain here because I'm the best man by a long sea mile. I like that boy now. He's more a man than any pair of rats of you in this here house. Let him be.
They, on their part, whispered among themselves and went outside to talk. Said Silver,
You're within half a plank of death or torture. And as for me, they're going to throw me off. I says to myself, you stand by Hawkins and Hawkins will stand by you.
You mean all's lost? I asked.
Ship gone, neck gone. Once I looked into that bay and seen no schooner, well, I gave up. I'll save your life. You save Long John from swinging. I have a head on my shoulders, I have. I'm on Squire's side now. I know you've got that ship safe somewhere. How you done it, I don't know. But tell me, Jim, why did the doctor give me the chart?
My face expressed a wonder at that. The council of buccaneers had lasted some time. When they re-entered the house, Silver immediately threw the treasure chart onto the ground. The appearance of the chart was incredible to the surviving mutineers. They leapt upon it like cats upon a mouse.
Yeah,
Said one.
JF, that's Flint, sure enough.
How are we to get away with it? And us no ship?
Said another. I then saw the remarkable game that Silver was playing. His intention was to keep the mutineers together with the one hand, while grasping with the other after every means possible and impossible to make his peace and save his miserable life. The following morning after breakfast, we set out on our quest for the treasure. We made a curious sight, all in soiled sailor clothes, and all but me armed to the teeth. Captain Flint sat perched on Silver's shoulder. The men were also carrying picks and shovels, pork, bread, and brandy. All the stores, I observed, came from our stock at the palisade. I could now see the truth of Silver's words the night before. Had he not struck a bargain with the doctor, then he and his mutineers would have been driven to subsist on clear water. The red cross on the map was, of course, far too large to be a guide, and the words on the back admitted of some ambiguity.
Tall tree, spyglass shoulder, bearing a point to the north of nor-northeast, Skeleton Island, east-southeast and by east.
A tall tree was thus the principal mark to look for. We proceeded in the direction of the tall tree. At the foot of a pretty big tree, and part hidden in a green creeper, which had partly lifted some of the smaller bones, we came upon a human skeleton. On a second glance, it was obvious that the skeleton was not in a natural position, because the man lay perfectly straight and pointing with both hands above his head.
I've taken a notion in my old numbskull,
observed Silver.
Here's the compass. There's the tip-top point of Skeleton Island, sticking out like a tooth. Just take a bearing, will ye, along the line of them bones.
The compass read east-southeast and by east.
I thought so,
cried the cook.
This here is a pointer. This is one of Flint's jokes, and make no mistake. He killed 6 men, and this one he hauled here and laid him down by compass, shiver me timbers.
We were now at the margin of the thicket.
Huzzah, mates, all together!
Shouted one of the pirates. The foremost broke into a run. Suddenly, not 10 yards farther, we beheld a great excavation, not very recent, for the sides had fallen in and the grass had sprouted on the bottom. In this were the shaft of a pick broken in two, and the boards of several packing cases strewn around. On one of these I saw, branded with a hot iron, the name Walrus, the name of Flint's ship. All was now clear. The cache had been found and rifled. A treasure worth hundreds of thousands of pounds was gone. There was never such an overturn in this world. Each of the pirates was as though he had been struck. But with Silver, the blow passed almost instantly.
Jim,
he whispered.
take that and stand by for trouble.
and he passed me a double-barreled pistol. Well, there we stood, the buccaneers on one side, Silver and I on the other. One of the pirates, Merry, raised his arm and his voice and plainly meant to lead a charge on us.
Now, mates!
But just then, crack, 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 3 musket shots flashed out of the thicket and 3 dropped dead. The others ran for it with all their might. The doctor, Grey, and Ben Gunn joined us with smoking muskets from among the trees.
Double quick, my lads!
Cried the doctor.
We must get to the boats before them.
While we made our way to the landing, the doctor told how Ben, in his long, lonely wanderings about the island, had found the skeleton, found the treasure, and carried it back to his cave in many a weary journey. There it had lain stored in safety 2 months before the arrival of the Hispaniola. When the doctor had got this story from Ben, and when he saw the anchorage deserted, he had gone to Silver and given him the chart, which was now useless. The doctor had also given Silver all their stores, for Ben Gunn's cave was well supplied with goat's meat salted by himself. Once this had been done, the doctor and his party had been able to move in safety from the stockade to keep a guard upon the money.
As for you, Jim,
He said,
I did what I thought best for us all. We kept an eye on the proceedings and were there to help you when the truth was out.
As we passed the 2-pointed hill, we could see the mouth of Ben Gunn's cave and a figure standing by it, leaning on a musket. It was the squire. To me, he was cordial and kind, saying nothing of my escapade, either blame or praise. At Silver's polite salute, he flushed.
John Silver,
He said,
you're a prodigious villain and impostor. I am told not to prosecute you. Well, then I will not, for the dead men, sir, hang about your neck like millstones.
Thank you kindly, sir,
replied Long John, again saluting.
I dare you to thank me,
Cried the squire,
it is a gross dereliction of my duty. Stand back.
and thereupon we all entered the cave. The cave was a large, airy place with a little spring overhung with ferns. The floor was sand. I saw great heaps of coin and triangles built of bars of gold. This was Flint's treasure that we had come so far to seek, and that had cost already the lives of 17 men from the Hispaniola. The next morning we fell early to work, for the transportation of this great mass of gold would take some time. Silver, I should say, was allowed his entire liberty, and seemed to regard himself once more as quite a privileged and friendly dependent.
I'm on your side now, hand and glove. Not like those men that ran away into the trees. They could not keep their word not to kill you.
No,
Said the doctor.
you're the man to keep your word. We know that.
It took 3 days to move all the treasure, during which time we did not see hair or hide of the pirates. We decided, therefore, to leave the men to their fate, and left a good stock of powder and shot, a few medicines, tools, a fathom or 2 of rope, and, by the particular desire of the doctor, a handsome present of tobacco. So we set sail for Bristol, but because we were short of men, everyone on board had to bear a hand. We laid her head for the nearest port in Spanish America, for we could not risk the voyage home without fresh hands. As it was, what with the winds and a couple of gales, we were well worn out before we reached it. It was at sundown when we cast anchor in a beautiful bay, and we were immediately surrounded by shore boats full of Mexican Indians selling fruits and vegetables. I went ashore with the squire and the doctor to pass the early part of the night. Here we met the captain of an English man-of-war, fell in talk with him, went on board his ship, and had a most agreeable time till daybreak. When we returned, it was to meet Ben Gunn, who was in the cabin alone. He began to make us a confession. Silver was gone. Ben had connived at his escape in a shore boat some hours ago. He assured us it was to save our lives because...
That man with one leg was dangerous while he was aboard.
But this was not all. The sea cook had not gone empty-handed. He had cut a hole in a bulkhead unobserved. Then he had removed one of the sacks of coin, worth perhaps 400 guineas, to help him on his further wanderings. I think we were all pleased to be so cheaply quit of him. Well, to make a long story short, we got a few more hands on board and made a good cruise home. 5 men only of those who had sailed from Bristol returned. After our return to Bristol, all of us had an ample share of the treasure. We all used it wisely or foolishly according to our natures. Captain Smollett retired from the sea. Ben Gunn got £1,000, which he spent or lost in 3 weeks, for he was soon back and begging for more. He was given a lodge to keep, and is now a pillar of the local church. Of silver we have heard no more. Whenever I hear the surf booming on the coast, I start upright in my bed with the sharp voice of Captain Flint ringing in my ears.
Beat the bait! Beat the bait!
And I still hear the chanting of